Well, good evening and welcome to this CFF program about literary publicity. My name is Ken Schept and I'm the president of Columbia Fiction Foundry. We're in for a great evening tonight. Let me start by telling you a little bit about Columbia Fiction Foundry and then we'll go into the program. So, Columbia Fiction Foundry, we're basically an organization devoted to one thing, helping each other become better fiction writers and or even published fiction writers. We have basically two simple criteria. One, a desire to write fiction, and the other, having graduated from one of Columbia University's school. And if you meet those criteria, we'd love to have you join our workshops or programs like this one. I think best way to do that is go to our website, and I think on the screen you should see the coordinates to our website. So with that, we have a lot to cover tonight, so let's keep moving along quickly. We're really fortunate to have with us tonight Jessie Glenn. She's a publicist, a literary publicist. So about 20 years ago, going on the 20th anniversary of their founding, Jessie founded a company called Mindbuck Media, which is basically devoted to helping people like us publicize ourselves and publicize our work. It's based in Portland, Oregon. So in preparation for this program, I had an opportunity to have a couple of conversations with Jessie. And what I found was a person who's extremely knowledgeable about the publishing industry, about publicity, and extremely generous about sharing that knowledge. And Jessie is also a truth teller. So I think we can learn a lot from what Jessie has to impart tonight. And I think with that, how we'll do this is since Jessie has a lot to share with us, she'll speak for about the first half of this hour, and then we will answer questions. One specific housekeeping note, put your questions in the Q&A. The chat is closed. I'll be watching the Q&A, and as the moderator, I'll be asking your questions, and I'm sure you'll have many questions, and I'm sure Jessie will have great answers. So with that, let me move it over to Jessie. Perhaps you can fill us in a little bit more about your bio and about your company and about how you are going to we'll leave this evening smarter than we entered it. So Jessie, please.
Thanks so much, Ken. I really appreciate that. The leaving you smarter than you came. I can't really necessarily promise that, but we'll do our best in terms of the literacy around publicity part. I understand that you are all at different places in your journey with your books, but quite a few of you are working on manuscripts or finished manuscripts and are looking for a publisher. So I think of that as being kind of a liminal space in publishing, like you've written a thing, you have a thing, but you haven't made it into a thing where people are reading it or people are able to access it, or you feel like you're an author rather than a writer. So I think as I sort of start this, it can give people sort of a spinny feeling, I think, when they think of all the things that they're supposed to do in order to get ready to somehow magically find a publisher and find an agent. And the fact is, it's very difficult to find a publisher and find an agent. And I'm not sure how many of you have already done agent searches or publisher searches. But there's, I was talking about the math behind it recently with a person on our team who does these small press searches, and she works for an agency in New York as well, and she thinks it's about 1% of people who are doing outreach will find a publisher sort of on their own. Most of the time, people find agents because they know somebody who has an agent who has a similar type of book, and they refer them, and then they get that read that they wouldn't normally get. That's a really short example to say your community is really important here. And one of the reasons that I do these talks, and I do them really pretty frequently, is that it's how I figure I can um, really demonstrate my literary citizenship or my commitment to literary citizenship. But literary citizenship is one of the pieces that really helps people get published and helps people publish strongly and have good sales. It's sort of easy to think of this in kind of a Machiavellian sort of way, like I'm going to do this for someone and they're going to do something else for me. And it truly isn't that. It's more it's more about what part are you going to play within this literary community? What can you provide for others? And the reason that you want to do that is that hopefully it gives you some pleasure because we are readers and we are writers. Um, but additionally, what you want to be doing is placing yourself within a literary community in a meaningful way so that when people think of you in your writing, they're associating you with other writers as well. So this group is a really great example of how, it sounds from what I was just chatting before with Ken and Mauricio and Stanley, like that this group hasn't been around that long. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's not like a 60-year tradition or whatever. So who the person that got this started, got this off the ground, and then introduced it to the Alumni Association, it's a really great example of literary citizenship because you have a group of like-minded people who are all working towards this goal, who are able to support each other's writing. As I understand, you're doing some workshopping of people's manuscripts, which is really fantastic. One, it's great to get feedback from other people because as you know, writing is it's a solitary pursuit. And there's this kind of visceral, for sometimes it's joy, sometimes it's terror, but like you get something out of people reading your work that you can't explain unless you're a writer. If you are a musician and you're playing on stage, you get this feedback from an audience automatically. But if you write and publish something and you hear back about it, it gives you a feeling like I'm I moved that person. My book has a life. Like my book lives independently from them. So all to say, when you're the person getting workshopped, that is a really significant and powerful thing. But to me, the literary citizenship piece is the people who are reviewing the work that you're doing. So reviewing people's work is a really powerful thing you can do as part of a group. You can do it outside of these workshops that you're doing right now. I really recommend, I know this is virtual, but anybody that you do know, anytime you have the opportunity to do a beta read for somebody, absolutely do it. Um, it's funny, sometimes authors will, especially newer writers, will finally finish their first draft and they will print out this giant thing and they will hand it to someone and they'll be like, I've given you a gift. And if you've ever received a first draft, or many even of someone's first draft, you'll understand that it almost sometimes feels like, oof, that is 8 to 10 hours of my life right here.
Yeah.
And it is an intense feeling. So I think as a writer, you have to remember like you're giving someone you're giving someone a job that they have to do, and hopefully they'll love doing that job. But as a reader, you're giving someone a huge gift of your time, and it is powerful. So another thing that we don't know is which of you writers is going to publish really successfully. And it's always really surprising, even in the industry. Um, we talk a lot internally about, there's so many different AI modules and bots. And if there was a way to feed a manuscript into a language bot and also analyze how well sales would do, we wouldn't have flops for movies or for books. There isn't anything that can tell us that. We really don't know. So truly, I mean, if you want to kind of guess whose manuscript you should be paying the most attention to, I think you're overthinking it. I think you should always try to say yes to everyone as much as possible and read and give feedback. and hopefully more positive than negative feedback. It's always more helpful. So just to kind of start here, like one of the most powerful things you can do is read unpublished people's books. And because when they are published, they might blurb your book. That's really hard to get as blurbs. So start there. Other things that you can do that are really important. If you have not published a book, or even if you have published a book, one way to keep publishing in between your actual release dates for books, which take a really long time, um, are publishing short pieces. I highly recommend it. And while I understand that this is a fiction group, what really is um, a powerful kind of short piece to place is the personal essay. And it really does kind of strengthen your chops when it comes to your own writing. I'm personally an essayist, so I'm absolutely not objective here, but I also have seen it work really well. One thing is that personal essays are highly shareable and very easy to be viral. So you don't have to talk about the writing process, but you might want to talk about something that overlaps with your interest in fiction so that you can reference those essays when you're out doing outreach to publishers or agents. So that's a really good idea to do. So knowing where to pitch those, I know people sometimes ask that question. That comes back to more literary citizenship, which is reading. So read lots of online material that you like, or just literary magazines, whatever it is that you're into, and find out what and who likes what you're doing. That's important. The kind of stuff that we're talking about with literary citizenship when we're really voting with our feet, know which bookstores, independent bookstores, are closest to you and go visit them. Like, for example, in New York, we just got really excited about Lofty Pigeon. It's a new bookstore that just opened recently, and we do a lot of event hosting, and it's always fun to find a new one. But whatever bookstore is closest to you, let me tell you, the Strand is very difficult to get into for first-time authors. That would be a real stretch, but there's so many. So visiting smaller literary books or smaller indie bookstores, buying books there, and specifically attending events. So go to events with authors that have perhaps the same genre as you, or just ones that you like. Get your book, get it signed, have those 2 words with that author, and then here's the rub. You kind of do have to do social media. And I laugh when I say it because I feel like not enough people just straight up say social media is awful, soul-sucking, and ruins your own writing. Because it's the worst. You kind of have to do it, but I do think the way I visualize it is this like sparkly juice stuff that like creates in your mind, and you use drops of it, like the muse or whatever you call it, whatever creates that
Hmm.
creative flow. Like you need that to write, but it eats it when you do social media. So any creativity that you're using on social media takes away from the magical stuff that you use for writing. So I'm happy to talk about a kind of quick and dirty way to do social media that's branded for authors. I do think if you have a personal social media account where you have a lot of followers, you can add your writing in as a brand, or you can start a separate one for your author site. Generally speaking, Facebook isn't as great for it because each of these outlets is a little bit like going to a different cocktail party. There's kind of different rules. So for example, Facebook, it's not really that cool to try to friend someone you really don't know that's more famous than you. It's kind of awkward. So on Instagram, though, you can really follow anybody that doesn't have a private page. So Instagram is a really great way to kind of position yourself in the literary world. And along with that, Threads, we're really liking. There is a robust, growing literary community there. I don't love Meta. I don't love Mark Zuckerberg, but I will say I like Meta better than I like the Nazis on Twitter. So we're an out on Twitter. We're a no. Beyond the Nazi factor, the functionality is terrible. So I mean, on Threads, I appreciate that the functionality is there, and as writers, it's nice to have a text-based service. So that's a text-based platform and it automatically connects to Instagram, and you can also do that. So why am I talking about that at the same time as independent bookstores? Because part of this literary citizenship piece is promoting other people and other places and other things that you like that are making books and are making places for books and are making places for people who write books. So say you go to the Lofty Pigeon and you see an author that you really love. Say you just saw Lydia Yachnovich in her last book and she was there and like you loved her. And what do you want to do with that information? So you had an experience, but how do you make this into part of your brain? So what you want to do is tag off the pigeon your post, and you want to tag Lydia Yachnovich your post, and you want to say, I was delighted to see this author. It was really profound. Neat new bookstore, gonna go there again. And then if you actually buy something, introduce yourself to the person there, because guess what? When your book comes out in like it's literally glacial time for publishing, so like years, they're going to ask you, do you know where to get events and things like that? And you can be like, oh yeah, Lydia down at, not Lydia, but whoever you want to call it, Christy or whoever at Lofty Pigeon is going to say yes because I've already talked to them about it before. So those are some quick ideas for literary citizenship, which is know your area, know the people there. Beyond this group, if you know other authors who put out books, always review them on Amazon, review them on Goodreads, and then write a review on your own social media and tag them and congratulate them. We lift each other up. So when it comes to, time is passing really fast here, so I'm not getting through hardly anything that I wanted to, but when it comes to submitting these manuscripts, kind of big and squares, see how you're reacting to the information in a sense, but like I don't know where all of you are in this process, but it's what you want to do basically. If you haven't published a book before, none of the publishers have any data about you. So what they want to do, as I said, since there isn't any bot that can guess how you'll do, they want as much data as they can to show that you're a good risk. So without any data of past sales, like if you can imagine what else they're going to try to use, social media is a really obvious one, right? So I mean, it's not as if social media coordinates exactly with sales, but it's better than nothing. So if they see you have 2,000 followers, say, it's not like that's a ton and it's not like it's nothing. But what they're really going to be looking at is how much do these people engage? Is it just like 2,000 bots that you bought, or are there people really interacting with every one of these different posts that you have? So that engagement rate is really important. How often you post is important. What you're doing is showing that you are a good and honest partner in a business. So when you put that stuff together, you're also going to want to list, things like the independent bookstores that you know. You're certainly going to want to list a list of blurbers. So blurbs are different than reviews in that these are friendly authors that you know who are going to write a short thing that goes on the back of the book. If you've ever looked at the back of a first released book, you're going to see that any of the reviews from outlets are going to almost always be from like Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal. Those are industry reviewers that you submit to really, really early. It's usually second editions that will have New York Times, or well, sometimes the New York Times comes out early, but generally speaking, it'll be the second edition that has USA Today or any of the newspapers, because those come out post-release. So the blurbs are really holding together the back of the book there, because you don't have a lot of other stuff before it comes out. So getting to know your community and having those blurbs, add that to the list of assets that you have. You want to have as many assets as possible. Then again, with this short publishing thing, if you have published a number of short stories or essays or other short material, for sure, you want to write down those links as well as the contacts that you have there. You always have the potential for getting covered with your book once you have a short piece somewhere. That's also really useful information. And then I know this is fiction, and so our company really specializes particularly in fiction, creative nonfiction, and memoir. So this is our milieu. And I often say it's because we're masochists, because fiction is much harder to publicize, both all three of those, than nonfiction. Because nonfiction, you have these evergreen titles like everyone's always going to need a book on parenting or something like that. But are they going to always need your fiction book? No, they're going to need it because they want it, because it's a cool thing, but they're not going to need that information for the information's sake, which makes it harder to find placements for it. That said, there's lots of room for you to be an expert in all kinds of places around your fiction writing. And libraries are a great way to start off with a public speaking kind of focus to your preparation for submitting. So, for example, you could reach out to your local public library and say that you wanted to give a talk on the experience of being part of this fiction writers group and your takeaways from that, and how you think that people can put together writing groups and the most successful aspects of them in their own community. That would be a really useful talk for a library. And then you would also get a writing credit, which would be really helpful for you. Um, all right, so I think I'll do a quick social media rundown in terms of how to not spend all of your creative energy on social media. Um, I have to say, many, if not most of our authors just don't want to do social media. So we also have an entire social media department where we do this for people. And what we mostly hear is people saying things like, I have so much less guilt now, because I think people have this tremendous amount of guilt around social media and how often they post and what they post and whether they're doing it right. And what it comes to is they ignore it all the time. And then one boring Sunday, they go on and they post on everything a whole lot. They friend all these people. It's really awkward and no one responds. And that's not a great way to do it. So here's a great way to do it. Take 5, we call them content pillars, but in my visualization, I imagine a pie. The pie is you, the author. Now, the slices are what makes you the author. Slice 1 is going to be that you are either working on this book or talking about a book that you've already published. You don't want to talk about that all the time because it's going to sound like an ad and that'll be boring. Slice 2 is going to be literary citizenship. So that's where we're going to put the thing about going to a recent event, or also all the books you're reading right now. If you have enough I don't know, personal discipline and you really feel strongly about it, try to start reading fiction that is written in the last 3 to 5 years. I do it. I always figure when I retire, I'll get to read the classics again because it's kind of my favorite. But right now, I get to read new books. Reading new books, what's great about it is the authors are alive, so that's helpful. And then also, they've recently had coverage, so they're also looking for coverage. So when you are writing about these books, they're easy to find on social media. So if you aim for reading, I don't know, 1 or 2 books per month, then you're going to be able to write a short summary on your social media. You're going to be able to talk about the events you have. You're going to be able to talk about the people that you know personally who have books coming out. That's that second slice of pie. Third slice of pie, I tend to make that a crossover between work. So for example, say you work in the alumni office here. That'd be kind of an easy one because you can talk about interesting things around alumni events, what you've learned from that organization, and how it intersects with this, which brings you back to that second slice. Fourth and fifth slices, we want something light. Everyone likes a puppy. I often have this conversation with people like, hey, do you have a puppy or a kitten? And it's really awful when they say something like, it just died. It's always like the worst conversation ever. But hopefully you have something alive. But if you don't, you can look out the window and be a bird watcher or whatever it is. But take pictures of some kind of animals because it makes people happy. The fourth, that one really was the fifth one. But the fourth one is generally hobbies. So something you're comfortable with sharing and that you take a lot of pictures at. I mean, think cooking, hiking, traveling, walking around your city. It can be a place-based one, but you take those 5 pillars, you put it into a spreadsheet, and then you can write out your content for weeks at a time. So if you are aiming for 3 to 4 posts on Instagram per week, then you can do 3 of those 5 and then rotate them. So you're never doing more in a row than you need to. And then for threads, you're going to want to do it more often, even up to 2 a day. We really just work Monday through Friday mostly because engagement's lowered on the weekend. But the point of this for you is that instead of trying to use up your creativity, thinking of like, what is this brilliant thing that I can say today? You're instead reinforcing a really specific brand where you know that people who are there because they want to be there, because they know the kinds of things that you're going to be talking about. We love talking about, you know, like if you're talking about your dog, for example, like make your dog your writing companion. Talk about where you write. Talk about those kinds of things instead of like hyping your own work so much. But certainly if you publish a short piece, post it and then post thank yous by tagging the editor or anyone else you can. So in terms of other services that we do, we do in a limited capacity submissions for small presses. Oftentimes people want to go, there's sort of 2 routes to go. You can go the agented route where you submit to agents and then those agents submit to publishers. There's a lot of publishers that you can't submit to directly without an agent. So that way takes a long time. Like I have an agent. She's great. She did not sell my book. But there's a lot of reasons not to go that way. One of them is the market is somewhat oversaturated right now. So as a first-time author, it's very, very hard to get in. If you are cold calling agents, your likelihood of getting one is very low. But the best way to do it is to make sure that you are pitching very specific agents that really, really cover the kinds of books that you have written. So write a list of comparative titles. Those are books that have a similar audience to yours. While we know that no book is going to be just like yours, we know that other people read more books than one. So find that and then write to them, follow all the instructions that they have on their page. Like don't make your creativity breaking the rules that they're asking for. But make sure you make it very personalized, like you know who they are and you know why you want them to read their book. That sample that you are requested at some point will go to their slush person and they will decide whether or not to pass it on to the actual agent. It's really hard to get an agent that way. The best way to the best way to do it is to ask someone you know, as an agent whether they'll send you a written introduction. So if you do that, the positive, you'll skip the slush session and you'll go to the agent will read your piece. And so a good shot at having an agent read it. That doesn't mean that they'll pick it up. Once the agent has it, they'll put together a kit. It takes a really long time. Within about 6 months or so, they'll hopefully be sending it out to various publishers. Okay, here's the rub with this entire setup. As a first-time author, if you do land a book at, say, Penguin, the pressure to sell is very intense. So you really need to sell a lot of titles in order to sell a second book. So if you don't sell a ton of books, your career is in worse shape than before you sold that book to Penguin. So the alternate route, which I kind of like, is the stair-step route, which is where you start off with smaller publishers and you build up to bigger publishers. Now that is assuming that you're a prolific author and you have more than one book. But with that in mind, it is possible to directly submit to smaller publishers. I'm not a fan of 99% of hybrid publishers. They're awful. There's a few that are quite good, but it is very different than traditional publishing. I recommend strongly against self-publishing. I think it doesn't do justice to the work that you've done, and it is hard to learn all of those different tasks and do it in a way that works. Our company does submit to small presses on a limited basis. or actually we don't. We put together a list of presses for you. We write all of the letters. We get everything organized. The presses do not want a publicist to submit. It's rude. So you do the submitting, but we would get it together, and we have relationships with a lot of them. So most of the time, if we get you to a place where you have your social media intact, we know that you look like a good literary citizen, you have a bunch of connections, we have all of the information they want. What we're seeing is about a 60% rate of requesting your materials, which is much higher than that 1%, and about a 30% rate of actually getting a publisher to buy your book, which is significantly higher than 1%. So that is that part of it. And I think I've run past my half hour of talking, but I have lots more to say, but I can
Yeah.
also take some questions. So Ken, direct me. What would you prefer?
Well, why don't I ask you a couple of questions,
Sounds
and
good.
then, I know you have plenty more, and then as it's relevant, include it. So, I mean, the first thought I wanted to this is sort of like a public service announcement, because I've already spoken with Jessie once before, and I'm taking copious notes because you are basically giving us literary publicity 101, an entire semester, in an hour. So, for people listening, this is recorded. And don't worry if you're not typing fast enough because you can listen to the recording and take it in. Um, the uh, the first question in the chat is, are there any disadvantages to promoting two books at the same time?
Great question. And we've worked on this a lot. I'd say yes. I find it pretty hard, especially if they're really different. So we just um we just worked on with an author who had one book of poetry and one fiction book. And this was a couple of years ago. And it was cool because David Sedaris blurbed the poetry book, and we don't normally do poetry, but we had that blurb and we were like, okay, let's go for it. We did get good coverage for both books, but oftentimes what I see is that authors lean more into one book than the other, and then it's unlikely that we would get coverage for both books. So we don't see a lot of people who are like, this is amazing. This author put out two books. We're going to write a feature article on how cool it is that they put out two books. Like I did not, and I have not seen that. So
Hmm.
mostly it's that we're splitting anything that we could share.
Okay.
But you can delay it, not by very much, and it'll be great because you'll already have everybody warmed up. You'll have your audience prepared, and that can be quite useful. I mean, that's why we really like it when people put out an audiobook, for example, 2 months or so after the release of their book, because then you can go back in and do more publicity. So um, this is kind of important. The publicity timeline starts around the time you sign with your publisher. So while we do these pre kind of publicity jobs like social media and submissions, the work of book publicity really starts around the time you're signing. And then the real work of it, where we're actually pitching and building, is about 7 months in advance of release. So usually it takes about a year between the time you sign and the time you release. But of course, everyone's editorial calendars are different. But we don't pitch much post release. And the reason is, even though book coverage, you don't think of the people covering books as journalists the same way you necessarily would with hard news, there is a journalistic aspect of it, which is that your book that's about to come out is news and they're breaking that news. And with a fiction book, that literally is the only hard news.
Okay.
With a nonfiction book, you could keep it going, but otherwise, we need more news. So that's why events, a new version of the book, anything that you can bring, awards are another really significant one. Anything that we can bring to new news means you can do coverage post release, but otherwise you can't.
Okay. I'm going to move fairly quickly here, Jesse,
Sure.
because now people have a lot of questions.
All
So,
right.
you on this topic about independent publishers, some being good, some not as good. Um,
I
could
meant
you
hybrid,
possibly,
not so good. Anyway, yeah.
well, we're putting hybrid aside, but of the independent presses that you feel would be worth, if you filter that, which are the, three, two or three that you would recommend, let's say?
Oh my gosh, I'm not gonna say who's
Well,
my
not
favorite
not
baby.
recommend, but let's say that if to put it in a way that you can answer the question, if you have a client and your client, you think this a client is a good candidate for an independent press, where would you look? What independent presses?
I am sounding like I'm being peevish about the question, but I promise
Okay.
I'm not. But the
Okay.
reason that I can't is that a lot of these small presses, they really are nichey. So
Mhm.
there isn't an answer to that. Like if
Okay.
you have 1,500 people in a fiction group, they're going to be so varied in terms of their tone and their genre and their way of writing. Like there's a lot of wonderful small presses and none of them will fit everybody. So one thing to do is to really read. I mean, like for you guys, like read small press books. That's something that is a
Hmm. Hmm.
good homework assignment. And find, we're looking for these comp books. Finding comp books in the indie presses is fantastic. I mean, there's so many small presses that I love, but I don't know. Yeah, there's a million, but I mean, I think discovering
Well,
them.
let's frame it a different way. If you
Okay.
are looking for a small press, is there a particular reference other than going on Google and saying small press? Is there some resource that we could direct people to?
Let me give that a think and get back to you, and then maybe you can give them the
Yeah,
way that I find new books is through media. So
yeah,
I hear, for example, like I really love the NPR big concierge of books at the end of the year.
right.
I believe they have a small press section, for example.
Okay.
Like there's so many places where you can find them, but
All right.
also uh
Let's leave it right there, Jesse.
okay,
We'll
but
say, because
bookstores too.
I want to move this faster now so we can get
Okay.
in as many questions as we can. So we, Columbia Fiction Foundry, will liaise with Jesse and try to come back and put on our website something that will be useful to people. This is a question, and this probably applies to a number of people in Columbia Fiction Foundry, all of whom are off, many of whom have had successful careers in one field or another. And the question is, what's the general attitude of publishers towards writers who are in a demanding non-writing career or have at the end of that career, but are now like medicine, but now have a manuscript and are dedicated now to sort of doing something with that experience creatively? Is that a good thing? Is it a neutral thing?
There are an impossibly small number of people who have writing as their primary career,
Mhm.
outside of like the business world. So, I would say it's not unusual. Also, it's funny, like the medical, like doctors, lawyers, academics are all the ones who retire and then write a bunch of books. Like,
Mhm.
um, everyone likes to write. But I don't think that that's unusual. I do think as an emerging writer, you do have specialized difficulty in that you don't have that back list, which is where those short pieces come in. So anything you can do to get your clips up, where you are showing credibility there within the field, you're showing interest. That's important. So yeah, it's a hurdle. And oftentimes there is an age component, but not as much as you think. I mean, I'd say like the most difficult thing in publishing is that it's so white. I mean, that's a really big struggle. Oftentimes I'll have, older men say like, they're never going to pick me. They always pick women. And I'm like, well, it's only actually 51% women and it's almost all white. So, I mean, you're doing good. But, but, yeah, I mean, I think that older authors represent a lot of the first time authors that we see. So yeah, it's
Okay.
very
All
well
right.
represented in the field.
All right. Thank you. Next question. And this has to do with sort of your conversation about social media. So, would it be appropriate to post sections of your novel on social media? Okay, that's
Don't
a
do
no.
it. No. Yeah.
Okay, that's a no. Now, next part of the question, or include comments from your readers and opinions about your work. What are
Mm,
your thoughts about doing a reading? This is like three questions. All this isn't quite social media, but what are your thoughts about doing a reading of your unpublished work
a
in an
live reading?
independent? Well, another, your book isn't out, so now you're sharing something, which is sort of putting you in a vulnerable spot.
Eh,
So, is that a good thing to do?
Um, I I think that you should put, I mean, just in terms of kind of like the practice of writing, I think you should keep the energy inside on your book rather
Okay.
than put it out, but that's really not an objective answer. But
Okay.
don't publish it on social media because it is considered published at that point and people will not want to buy it. So do not do that. I don't think, I mean, obviously you're going to share the writing that you've read because you need beta readers and everything else. I
Yeah.
don't know whether they'd host an event with you reading an unpublished manuscript, but there's lots of
Ah,
places where you
ah,
can read. So that's fine. Yeah.
right. Okay. Actually, just as a sidebar, that's something where Columbia Fiction Foundry is thinking about
I think it's a
that
good
kind of
thing.
forum.
Yeah.
Also, it's sort of literary citizenship in a
Mhm.
way.
Yeah.
Relative to social media, just sticking on that,
Sure.
heard what you said about self-publishing. Does that apply to Substack as well?
Yes. And so it's funny. I know a lot of, I don't know, I don't know if you know On the Media, that show that Bob Garfield used to be on before he got kicked off. He's like a dear friend of mine, and he
Uh-huh.
is publishing his book on Substack, and I'm like, dude, what a dumb thing to do. But you know, I'm seeing people do that, and like, you know, admittedly, like going with the flow here. I don't think it's a great idea. If you have an enormous audience and you're charging subscriptions to see this book and you're making money off of it, I get that it's a Dickensian thing. Like I understand that Charles Dickens published in a serial fashion and we're like reflecting that. I understand that entire thing. It's not publishing to me, but I don't know. That's my thought.
Okay. I think this question goes back to at least, the impression that if we did everything that you outlined, including, creating the spreadsheet, which actually should make life easier because then we sort of see
It
the
will.
5 pillars and how we have to activate them. But in a sense, that's why writers would go to you because we don't like doing that part. We like the
No, I mean,
writing
I
part.
don't like doing
Yeah.
that part. I like the
Yeah.
social media part and doing it. It's awful. But
Um,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
So the question is, thank you for all the information. Everybody wants to be published. How
Yeah.
hard it is, despite doing all the work. None of this question, are there some writers who what kind of writer should try, what kind of writer shouldn't even try? I guess it's not to do everything that you described. And let me put a slightly different spin on that. That's the core of the question. But the other one is something that you and I had talked about before, which is among the people who are listening to this, Columbia Fiction Foundry members, some are writing literary fiction, some are writing mysteries and other genre fiction. Uh, does the way we publicize our work or ourselves, does does genre have any bearing on the steps that we should be taking?
Um, Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Mm.
so I would say, you know, when we're talking about reading, which I know I'm hammering in, but you'd be amazed at how many people who like to write, who I'm like, what did you last read? And they're like, oh, I read some William Blake. And I'm like, oh my God. But if you write mystery, read mystery, find out who's doing mystery online, follow them, you know, like
Yeah.
learn where people hang out. As to the question of is it even worth trying to publish a book, that's a really personal question because some people are writing a book about, say, their own family history and they want to they want to print 5 copies of it for their own family. Like I've seen this happen before. There is no reason to do all of this other stuff for that. Like, why
Hmm.
would you? This is a
Hmm.
project that
Hmm.
is special for you and is a gift to
Hmm.
your family.
Hmm.
If you want other people to read your book, then you
Hmm.
need to do all the things. And it's kind of unfair because I always kind of come back to like a writer's job should be writing. That should be the
Hmm.
main job.
Hmm.
But having other people do all the other stuff is expensive. And so it really is, there is a, you know, a capitalistic bent to like being able to stay purely a writer. I
Hmm.
try to break it down in a way that makes it so that you
Hmm.
can do those things, but it also is and is a little soul sucking sometimes. So what do you think?
Okay. Um, Next question. This is from someone who wants to be out there, has wants it wants and has done readings of his work in different public spaces, coffee houses, whatever. So the question is this: can videos of that kind of reading be used in the search for an agent?
No. Um, I can't imagine an agent wanting to see you publicly read unpublished work. But I do think if you are really comfortable with public speaking, then do public speaking on a topic that's not reading your book.
Yeah,
And then you definitely get that credit. Um, I guess, but I mean, and just
but
for your
I mean,
information, I'm not,
yeah,
I don't specialize in poetry, but I
yeah,
would say, and like one part that doesn't like fit
yeah.
is poetry is a little different. So if you're
But I
doing like,
mean,
yeah,
let's say that this is, even if it's fiction, and you've done a reading and you have a video of it. So the question is, should I send it to an agent? Well, maybe that's not the best thing, but I
no.
suppose that's something you could put up on social media someplace that could be useful.
Yes, you could. But I think more important
Yeah.
would be to take pictures and video of other people there,
Ah,
right? Because I mean, like, what are you saying by posting your own self
ah,
reading out loud? But if you are supporting other people and tagging them, particularly people that are better known than you, then you're participating in events and you're hyping your own people in a way that's going to build community and support you. So, what I would tell an agent is, I'm deeply involved in a reading series with X, Y, and Z, all of whom will probably blurb me. I really appreciate that. It's, there's 500 people involved. Yes, I can get access to those mailing lists. And the collateral that you get as being part of a group is what an agent wants to know. They do
mhm.
not want to see a video of you reading your piece as much. That's not going to be as
Okay.
like, because what would they get out of it, Like what
Okay.
data would they get? I mean, being telegenic is helpful,
Yeah.
but
But no, that's very clear. And it goes back to the premise of literary citizenship and associating, and somehow you give something, you get something back eventually if it works, or not. Um, another question, um, how how does one best turn published personal essays, which you had talked about, into a book deal?
well, in my personal experience, and which
Yeah.
is really different than my work with Mindbuck
Hmm.
Media,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
I had an essay in New York Times Modern Love. I don't know if you've heard of that column before, but it's kind of one of those columns
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like
yeah,
a banger.
yeah.
So I got a piece in that, and you know, the next day, 4 or 5 different agents were calling wanting to, represent me. So that was helpful.
Mhm.
Uh, I wanted to write a book of essays. Those are really hard to sell. So from there, it became more complicated. But um, that is a way that you can get a book deal.
Okay. Um, going also on literary citizenship.
Yeah.
Person is saying, this has been so helpful. Love to learn more
Good.
about literary citizenship. Opportunities you might recommend. Well, now we're in the New York City area, especially around Columbia. But maybe you could broaden that because people listening will be from all over, even
Yeah.
possibly internationally. And I know that just in our sidebar conversation, you mentioned this uh, event coming up in Baltimore. So when you think about
Yeah.
organizations or events that we might not know about, which would be useful in that literary citizenship sense, what comes to mind?
The event that we talked about was AWP, and it's
Mhm.
in Baltimore, and that's the biggest, I think, writer centered conference. And I do think it can be very both stimulating and um, inspiring for authors to be able
Mhm.
to go be with that many authors and see so many different panels about specifically writing and the process of writing. Um, I'm also a very big fan of writing retreats, especially if like
Mhm.
if you this is also another piece of the pie of getting blurbs. And all of these things cost money as well, but if you have an author that you absolutely love and really feels like a good fit with your work, chances are they run some kind of literary retreat because that's how authors primarily make their money is speaking gigs and retreats. So find out where. Sometimes it'll be somewhere lovely, like in France, and go to it. And one thing that's great is if it's a smaller one, say 20 or fewer people, and you're spending, most of a week there, you'll get to know that author and you quite likely will be able to ask them for a blurb for your book afterwards. So those are really, really helpful
Hmm.
opportunities to significantly increase your reach when it comes to building this um, box of assets when you're submitting to a small publisher or an agent. Like really, really useful. Um, Karen Carbo does one in Polier, I think, France, and it just sounds awesome. Really want to go. But they are all over the place and many many people do them. So yeah, that's a great thing to do. So those are things you can find out about by following those authors. I mean, you can of course just Google like the author and retreats or something like that. I don't go to a lot of the smaller writer conferences, but there's a lot of regional conferences. There's definitely a subsection of mystery conferences, and I don't go to those either, but they sound awesome. And I think it would probably be quite useful for mystery writers. When you go to a conference like AWP or a mystery conference and they have all the tables of people lined up at part of the conference. If there are a lot of small publishers there, do your homework first. There's an entire like strategy to that. So look at the pamphlet, see who's there, figure out what books just came out this year, see if any crossover with yours, and go really directly to those booths and say hi to them because small publishers, it's not like they have a ton of lackeys who are working there. It's the people working at the publisher. So they you really are talking probably to the editors themselves. So go up, buy a book, and be like, hey, I'm really excited by this book because it kind of reminds me of the book that I'm writing right now. What's your submission process? And you
Okay.
immediately are talking to someone directly that you can reference when you later submit your book.
Thank you. I plan to do that.
Yeah.
Uh, the
I'll see you in
uh,
person. We'll have a booth.
that'd be great. Jesse, we're getting close to the ending time. I want to leave the some time at the end for you to talk specifically about Mindbuck because I think there are specific things, and not because you want to advertise, because I know that there are things that can be useful to the audience. But one or two questions before that. Can you talk a little bit about the role of a personal writer's writer's personal
Oh,
website?
yeah.
Yeah.
I do think that's important. And I understand like again like how I started talking about being in
Yeah.
that liminal space between
Yeah.
having a book published and not. It's like, well, what do I put in my what do I put in there? But once you've at least published one thing, or if you have other creative endeavors, if it crosses over with something else that you do, you can put it together. But basically, we really want some place, if someone Googles your name, where we can hang all of the accolades. So the book that you have at the top, the book that's coming out, your articles, your events, the things that you're doing, all of your social media in one place. It's a kind of like you need that. And it's also a place where you can build your mailing list as well. So you can certainly have something on there where you can incentivize signing up for that mailing list. I mean, don't send too many emails, but at the same time, like quarterly sending something out, totally reasonable.
Okay. Thank you. Quick question. If someone works in multiple fiction genres, published at different times, how does that work in terms of marketing?
It's fine. I think it's kind of a fun one, actually. I mean, the hardest part is that, what we love about working with authors who already have books out is we can, like, publicity is cumulative. So we can take your reviews that you've already gotten and put them onto the press kit to start it off
Mhm.
so that we already have everything front loaded. So when we're pitching people, we already have great news to share with them. When you have really wildly different genres, sometimes the reviews that we're sharing won't make as much sense, for example, but it it does kind of give you a chance to build into new markets. And it is, it's a challenge on social media, but it's a fun challenge, really, because it's like you get to have a few more content pillars and you get to talk about these different audiences and you get to find different audiences. So making sure that you're both looking at the multi-genre author audience as well as the different genres that you're covering can be really fun.
Okay. And maybe, thank you, Jessie. And maybe in the final couple of minutes here. So if you could just talk a little bit about this company that you founded 20 years ago and
20 years in January. Yeah,
oh, congratulations.
that went
Uh,
fast, right?
oh, I guess, yeah, yes. But you, I know that you do publicity. That's sort of your flagship, social media, and that you have an author website where you can do publisher searches. So maybe if you just expand a little bit on those and maybe you talk about where there might be a connection for some of the people who are listening in. And
Sure.
I think we might have your website to be able to post it, or you can say what it is.
Yeah. Our company is Mindbuck Media, and we're pretty easy to find. We did just recently find out that there's some spam bots who are pretending to be us and sending authors weird letters. So we're never, ever, ever going to contact you out of the blue and ask you to buy stuff. That's not a thing. I assume you know that. We have Publicity, yes, our main service. Our social media department is one of the only author fiction social media departments in the country. We do this publisher outreach program for finding homes for manuscripts, website design and building, as well as modifications if you're wanting to revise it. We do award submissions post-release on your book. We do media training for authors who are getting ready to be able to do public speaking. We have merch, which is quite fun. It doesn't work for every book, but when it does, it's really a fun thing to make these boxes and send them out. And we've done some really kind of, I mean, I think sort of innovative things like, for example, with a mystery that we were working on, we work with the person who is organizing the MIT puzzle hunt, and he put together an online scavenger hunt that you need the book in order to answer the clues, and it was quite complicated, but our team did finish. So it's a timed uh, puzzle hunt with the book purchase as a requirement. So you can see how that would work publicity wise. So if you want something really unusual, interesting, and hand built, I'm always up for a challenge. But we also do all of these other elements as well. And for authors who are looking for publishers, I mean, I really do think that the social media piece, the submission piece, probably the website piece, if we have enough material, are all really good places to start. And then when you are pitching publishers, letting them know that you have talked to a publicist at this point, you've gotten a lot of information from me at least. I don't think it's a stretch to say, you know, I've gotten a lot of information from Mindbuck Media, and I know that I need to hire a publicity company. I'm going to be a good team member when it comes to working along with publicity. Like those are things that publishers want to hear, that they know that you know that these things need to be done. Very helpful.
Well, thank you, Jessie. First,
The whirlwind.
well, we are sort of at the end of our time. So first, apologize to anyone whose questions we didn't fit in. I think we've managed to get most of them in. I think if you still have a question, you could email it to Fiction Foundry and we can forward it to Jessie, or would it be okay if they forward a question directly to you, Jessie?
Absolutely. I always assume
Yeah.
people have a lot of questions after this talk because it's
Yeah.
just kind of like I'm saying so many things. So you're welcome to email me directly at jess@mindbuckmedia.com. It might take me a little bit to get back, but I certainly will. And I understand that a lot of questions are highly specific to the work that you're doing. So that is also totally fine. And that is my job. So it's all
So
good.
I would say I learned a lot.
Good.
The other day, I learned the term literary citizenship, and tonight I learned that you are the personification of literary citizenship. So thank you for being so generous with your time.